All right, hello everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the Chamber Educational Series, Not Your Normal Conflict, What Every Professional Needs to Know About Workplace Bullying. The Duluth Chamber is grateful to provide this offering free of charge to our members because of the generosity of our sponsor, the College of St. Scholastica. I have the pleasure of introducing you to our speaker for today. Don Johnson is the author of Outwit the Workplace Bully, 8 Steps You Need to Know to Reclaim Your Career, Confidence, and Sanity, which earned a finalist award through American Book Fest. In 2022, Women's World magazine featured Don as one of America's experts on workplace bullying. Don is often called upon to speak on the topics of workplace bullying, building workplace trust, and effective leadership. Don is an assistant professor in the Stender School of Leadership, Business, and Professional Studies at the College of St. Scholastica and serves as the program director for the MBA in Leadership and Change. She earned her BA in psychology along with a Master of Business Administration and a Master of Arts in Management, all from the College of St. Scholastica. Before I hand it off to Don, just a reminder that this is intended to be a conversational session, so please feel free to ask questions either on audio or in the chat. There will also be time for questions at the end. Don, thank you for joining us today to share how we can all learn new ways of handling workplace bullying in the most effective way. I'll give it to you to take it away.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Many people are curious as to how I became an expert in workplace bullying, and I often share with them that I don't think anybody sets out in their career to become an expert in workplace bullying. I think workplace bullying finds us, and it's only through our own personal experiences in the workplace that we are driven to learn about this behavior, understand the phenomena, and to help other people who are experiencing it. We don't oftentimes talk about workplace bullying. People who have experienced it don't talk about it. We don't talk about it or teach our employees about it in workplaces typically. And after decades of hiding my own experience, I decided to bring my experiences into the light in a very public way. In 2022, I published my book, Outwit the Workplace Bully. And my goal with this book was really to not only share my two different experiences that were in two different workplaces decades apart, and to let other targets know that this does happen to other people, that they're not alone. I wanted to share with them how and why they were targeted so they could understand that. And hopefully by the end of the book, feel more hopeful and confident that they could go on and have a very successful and confident career beyond this experience. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn what is conflict versus what is bullying. They're two different concepts that I think oftentimes get used interchangeably. How does bullying impact both organizations and the individuals in the organization? We're going to learn a few techniques on how to intervene when we see bullying occurring in the moment. And then what steps can organizations take to prevent workplace bullying from taking hold or taking over in their workplace? So I named my presentation today, Not Your Normal Conflict. And as I mentioned, I think bullying gets lumped under this heading of conflict. And really, they're two distinct things. More often than not, a bullying situation gets labeled as an interpersonal conflict, a conflict where just two people just can't get along. And hopefully by the end of my presentation today, you'll understand that that couldn't be farther from the truth. So let's start with just a textbook definition of conflict. We can say that conflict is any situation in which people have incompatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings, or even just the perception or appearance of those incompatible interests, goals, principles, or feelings. In our organization, conflict is probably inevitable. We have more than one person working in our organization. There's probably going to be some conflict, and there are many sources of conflict in an organization. Here I have listed just a few. When we have lack of resources in an organization, that may create a competitive situation and lead to some conflict. When we have unclear roles, we find that people are bumping into each other or things are getting missed because people don't know if they're supposed to do it or if somebody else is supposed to do it, and that creates a conflict. We can have really talented employees, but they're working in a broken process, a process that's very manual, or isn't very well thought out. And just the fact that we have a lot of change in every organization, that can also create conflict. So we mentioned that I teach in the MBA in leadership and change at the College of St. Scholastica, and I teach a course called Conflict Negotiation and Coaching. In fact, I taught it last night. We're about halfway through our session this summer, and we go deep into these sources of conflict. And we also learn that conflict can actually be a healthy indicator in an organization. If we have people who are disinterested, we might see a lack of conflict. It might mean that people are disengaged or don't care anymore. If we don't see some healthy debate, people putting difference of opinions out there, and conflict can actually build a lot of good competencies in an organization. If we are dealing with change, or sorry, with conflict proactively, and we are not allowing it to go on to a point where it's really eroding relationships, we can strengthen communication among team members. We can help individual employees build their emotional intelligence and understand how to deal with these conflict situations. We also can encourage and have healthy, respectful debate, and potentially bringing all those ideas together can create a more innovative solution than if we had just one person's idea. So conflict really can be a lever that an organization can use for good, and certainly it can erode to a point if it goes on too long to a point where it can start to impact the organization's ability to function. Conflict is very different from workplace bullying. So let's define workplace bullying next. Workplace bullying is a toxic behavior, and it is not necessarily a conflict. It's a behavior. So this definition was designed by a variety of academics and counselors and other people working in the field of workplace bullying. The term workplace bullying actually came to us from Europe and wasn't actually in the United States when I experienced my very first experience in 1996. I think it actually came to the US in about 1998. So I didn't even have a name for this thing that was occurring to me. But here's their working definition of workplace bullying. It is a persistent, and I would say consistent, pattern of mistreatment from others in the workplace that causes either physical or emotional harm. And they actually include health harm in this definition. And the reason for that is that most targets actually experience some kind of physical symptom. We see a lot of stomach aches, high blood pressure, headaches, insomnia, heart palpitations. And for some targets, if they are in this situation for long periods of time, this can become chronic health issues that don't ever go away for them, or at least don't go away while they're in the situation. We'll talk about specific behaviors in a minute, but the tactics are very broad. So you can see here on the screen, the tactics can be verbal, they can be nonverbal, they can be psychological. So getting somebody to doubt their own reality. I turned that in. No, you didn't. I did that. No, you didn't, right? Getting somebody to really doubt their own reality. And it can even evolve into physical intimidation or even physical abuse. What we find with bullying is, one, there is not a law against workplace bullying in the United States. There are in some other countries, and certainly there are organizations, including one that I'm a part of, that is working to get legislation passed to make this against the law. But there is no law, and oftentimes bullies will walk that fine line of bumping right up against kind of a workplace violence situation, or they may a defamation kind of situation, but they oftentimes don't cross the line. So we see very, very few cases at this point going into a court system. But they walk that fine line of crossing that line into some of those more illegal places. Almost every single case of workplace bullying involves some type of humiliation. This is, I think, a very strong definition, but it's probably, even as I've been working with human resources professionals at least in this area, very few have been trained about what this is and how it really specifically differs from conflict. And I do feel like I have a great opportunity being an instructor in the MBA and Leadership and Change, being able to share with a variety of leaders across the country, because our program is online. We have people from all over the country, and being able to start to get people's understanding around the difference between conflict and workplace bullying. So before we get too much deeper into some of the research around workplace bullying, I would love to test what I call your bully intelligence. How much do you already know about this concept? So if you'd like to, you don't have to, but if you'd like to participate, I encourage you now to go to slido.com if you have another screen or on your device, your phone or your tablet. Go to slido.com, and when you're prompted, enter the code that you see on the screen, 422477. And I'll just give you a moment to log in. All right, hopefully people have had a chance to do that. If you get bumped out for some reason, it's also on all of my polling slides, so you can always get back in. So the first polling question I like to test you with is, what do you think? What percentage, now that we know what it is, we know that we have this definition, what percentage do you think of the US workforce is impacted by bullying annually? Is it 15%? Is it 27% or 49%? Looks like the votes are coming in. I'll give it a couple more seconds here. All right, looks like the voting has slowed down. So if you guessed 49%, you either heard my presentation before, or maybe you heard my presentation before, but you were absolutely correct. You maybe guessed correctly just by chance too. A lot of people don't realize it's that many. I see a lot more people responding 15% and 27% typically. So good. You have some good bully intelligence already. About 79 million people in the United States are impacted by bullying. And when we say impacted, we don't mean that many people are targeted. When we say impacted, it means there are people who are targeted, but there are also people around them that are witnessing it. And we also know from research that just by witnessing it, there can be some trauma involved that can impact how long you stay with an organization, especially if nobody in the organization is dealing with that. So when we say impacted, we're counting both those who are being targeted specifically and those who are witnessing that behavior. Good job. Let's see how you do on the next one. The next question is, true or false? Males and females are targeted equally. True or false? All right, looks like voting is slowing down here. So if you said true, you are correct. So originally, when the Workplace Bullying Institute started studying this back in the late 90s, most of the people reporting this behavior were female, and most of the time they were reporting they were being targeted by a female. So until they started doing their annual, they do every couple of years they do a nationwide survey. Until they actually started doing that survey, they thought this was potentially females against females. But actually 51% of the targets are male and the other portion are females. We see males most often be the aggressor, the bully. And we also see leaders most often. I think about 62% of people who are targeted report their bully as being a leader in the organization. When females bully, they most often bully other females. So we have some really good data over the course of the last 30 years from the Workplace Bullying Institute, really studying what this looks like. So it's really not a gender issue. The genders can be targeted equally. So last question, last chance to weigh in. Approximately what percentage of targets lose a job because they are targeted by a workplace bully? 10%, 70%, or 58%? Looks like we're almost got almost everybody voting. All right. If you said 70%, you are correct. So approximately 70% of targets lose a job, typically a job they loved, a job they were good at. And most of those people lose that job because they leave it. They leave it because the bully continued to target them and nobody around them was doing anything. About 12% of that number are actually fired from their job. And we'll talk about in a little bit the target, how people are targeted and how the bully undermines the target's performance. And so actually some of these targets lose their job because they're either laid off or fired, and they probably wouldn't have been had they not been targeted by this person in the workplace. So good job. So we already talked a little bit about some of the impacts through our questions, but when we have somebody who is aggressive or screaming or distracting people in some way, or there's people who are fearful of being targeted, we tend to see some of these come out or show up in the organizations. So we tend to have, if we have distracted people, we have safety accidents, safety incidents. So we have safety issues. We tend to have lower quality and lower productivity for a variety of reasons. Maybe we have more absenteeism, or we have people getting distracted, trying to avoid the bully. So they're maybe not working as effectively and efficiently as they could be. So we end up with some quality issues. We end up with lots of productivity. Turnover costs. We just talked about the fact that that a lot of the targets leave, but I also mentioned that actually we know that witnessing some of this behavior can be just as traumatic for people, the witnesses. And we do see high levels of people around the target also leaving. So we have turnover costs and retraining costs, all those things that we would need to replace somebody. And hint, hint, a bully needs to bully. So a bully will find a new target. So even though the person leaves, that's how we get to, we'll start to discover a pattern naturally in these cases because they have this need to target people. We see increased absenteeism, as I mentioned. It brings the culture down. We have a low employee morale. And we're starting to see more and more organizations with social media, with targets being braver to speak out about this. We start to see more and more reports of what actually happened in organizations, which causes damage to the reputation of the organization. I don't know how many of you were following the story, and there's probably other examples of this, but a couple years ago, the CEO of the company Better.com fired 900 people over Zoom in a mass firing, and this made big headlines. And after that incident, many employees who were let go came out with stories of the abusive behavior and the things that were said to people in that organization by that CEO, leading to the CEO needing to step down, and it delayed an acquisition by that company. So really did impact that organization's reputation and future bottom line and ability to do the work that it was designed to do. So let's talk about behaviors. We've talked about what it is, but what does it look like? And this is what I think is really key for employees to understand, and leaders and HR professionals is we need to start recognizing these behaviors as, again, just not normal conflict. What you see here on the screen are the four types of what I call categories of bullying behavior. If you go to the Workplace Bullying Institute, they call them bully types. But in my experience and my work with other targets, what I really have come to understand is that we may have a bully who has a go-to type that they like to use, but at the same time, um, we could see any bully use any or all of these. So I think that any of these could be mixed together and used to target people. So we won't just see one discrete type of behavior. If you go to the Workplace Bullying Institute's website, you'll find slightly different names for these. When I was writing my book, I renamed them just for ease of reading. For example, if you go to their site and you look at the screamer behaviors, they call that the screaming Mimi. And it felt really awkward to say screaming Mimi over and over again. Same with the deceiver. I named the deceiver again, just for a descriptor and for ease of reading, because I think the Workplace Bullying Institute calls it the two-headed snake. So it was kind of hard to keep repeating those words. So again, these are my labels to, again, the Workplace Bullying Institute's work that they've done over the course of 30 years. So let's dive deep into each one of these. The screamer. This is really the stereotypical bully on the playground that most people think of when we hear the word bullying. They're loud, they're aggressive, they're angry, they love to humiliate, and they love to do it really publicly. Some of the behaviors, again, not an exhaustive list by any means, but some of the behaviors we might see from the screamer are verbally intimidating, shouting, being insulting. They might demonstrate their contempt for what you're saying or doing with nonverbals. That could be scoffing at your ideas in a meeting or eye rolling. They might even move to the edge of some physical behaviors in terms of being very intimidating physically, screaming in your face, finger pointing, perhaps blocking your exit from a room, or actually touching you in some way. They could shove or bump, knock things out of your hand. Again, kind of to the edge of that violence. They don't really cross over into assault, but they really walk to that edge. Now, what's interesting about the screamer is even though it's the most stereotypical type that we see or that we think of, it's the least common. And this is just my theory, but I think because it's so visible, organizations have a better time dealing with it. They see it and then they say, you know what, this isn't okay. This is impacting a lot of people. And they're able to maybe manage that behavior or coach that person out, do what they need to do so that the behavior stops. Because it is the least common that we see. Certainly does still occur and can occur with these other behaviors as well. So the critic, again, might be a little bit more subtle, could be paired with a screamer. They could be a loud critic, but the critic is somebody who is overly critical, like you cannot do anything right. So they're not doing this to be helpful or doing it in a spirit of learning. They are being unreasonably critical. And the reason they do that is because they can completely undo somebody who's a solid professional by discrediting their performance. So they might downplay your contributions or your accomplishments. They may question your skills or your degrees. They may remove responsibility or title and don't have any reason for it. They may also suggest you resign. So again, not an exhaustive list of behaviors, just a few examples. This could look like a really tough boss, but if we see this pattern over time, and I oftentimes tell people, leaders and HR professionals, if you have a solid professional who has never gotten a bad review in their life and all of a sudden they get a new boss and then this is what's happening to them, you maybe should question that. The bosses before them probably weren't all wrong. So third type of bullying behavior is the gatekeeper. Again, pretty subtle. The gatekeeper keeps their targets from getting their work done by withholding resources, particularly things that they need to do their job. That could be training, it could be budget, could be information, could be even time. And again, very covert pieces that could again look like a very conservative boss. I'm keeping the budget under control by not sending them to that training, or by not inviting everybody to the meeting, etc. So they could exclude people from meetings. They withhold training or information. They may consistently pair unrealistic workloads with crazy deadlines. So you can never get things done on time, or if you do get them done, they're done kind of halfway because you can't get it done in the time frame that's allotted. They may also refuse to give you time that you have earned. Your vacation time, your sick time may not allow you to take that. So again, a little bit more subtle behavior, but if we see a pattern of this, falls into the bullying category. Now, the most subtle of the four is the deceiver. And the deceivers, I use this this mask very intentionally in the graphic here, because the deceivers have two faces. To you, to the target, to people who are in charge, leaders, people who have influence in their career, they're cooperative, they're friendly, they're your best friend. But behind the scenes, they're spreading rumors, they're telling other people about your incompetence, they're getting other people to come to their to see it their way, and oftentimes enlist others to go along with them and target the target with them. So again, just a smattering of behaviors you might see: spreading rumors, gossiping, making false accusations about you, intentionally sabotaging your work, or intentionally sabotaging reputation by going to others and spreading false allegations or rumors about you. They're really good at getting information out of other people, and they will use confidential information, maybe things that you've told them in confidence or that others told them in confidence, against you or against others. So very, very, very manipulative behavior. So I often tell people, if you see somebody who has kind of two sides to their, so they're the picture of perfection in the meeting where they're executives, but then they have this other side of them where they're very demeaning and sarcastic and rude to peers, that may not mean that they're a deceiver, but I say steer clear, because anybody who can switch faces like that is probably steer clear because they're probably up to no good at some point. Or they may be targeting people. We sometimes don't know. My second experience was with a deceiver, and I didn't know anything until it was too late, until I there was already damage to my reputation and career, and then this all came out. So those are the four categories of behavior. So things that you need to keep in mind, be wary of, look for patterns in the workplace. But let's talk about the target. And I admittedly, before I went into researching my book, thought there must be something with me that makes me a good target. And so I had internalized that. Even though I knew I was a pretty, smart person and a good employee, there must be something about me that people think they can take advantage of, or think that they can treat me this way. What I found out in the research was that that was not at all true. The average age of the typical target is 42. In fact, 75% of 75% of people that are targeted are between the ages of 30 and 59. So these are people who are very skilled at what they do. They're very experienced. They've probably been at your organization a while, or they've been in the industry a while. They often are considered the go-to people in their organization. They hold some level of personal or professional power, meaning they're very well liked, and people gravitate towards them because they're well liked and they have this personal power. Or they could have some professional power. They could have a formal leadership position, or because they're so experienced, they're called upon a lot, relied upon a lot. They're often highly regarded by peers, and at least in the bully's perception, they have a high moral fortitude. I would argue they probably do have a high moral fortitude, but that having this information gives us some clue as to why a bully might bully. We don't know exactly. We have some theories, but no bully is lining up to be studied. Like nobody's saying, hey, ask me why I target somebody at every organization I go to. We don't know the real reasons why they bully, but we suspect that they have some jealousy about this person who holds personal and professional power. They may, in some cases, want that person's job, and they're targeting them to get them out of the job so they can have it. Or they are doing something either unethical or, somehow against policy, and they're worried that this person that they're targeting is going to get them and tattle, for lack of a better word, tattle on them, and so they are going to disrupt and ruin this person's reputation before they have a chance to tattle on the bully. So even though there might not be any indication that the target is going to do that. So again, might be some perceptions that the bully has. So what is the goal of the bully? Initially, they are just going to try to undo their performance. So they're going to limit their ability to do their best work. That might be through limiting time and information, etc. That might be by being highly critical, and maybe this person's never had that kind of criticism in their life, and that's very upsetting to them, and they are distracted by that. It could be screaming and humiliating. However they do that, they're going to disrupt their ability, distract them. And oftentimes, the target, as this goes on over time and nobody steps in, and in fact, people may actually be joining in or protecting the bully and not helping the target, their performance will actually continue to erode. And they may become so upset, hypervigilant, tired, because we can get some insomnia going on with these targets, that they are actually making mistakes. Their performance does erode. And then the target will further use that to ruin their professional reputation. See, Dawn's crying at work. She can't handle it. See, Dawn made a mistake here. Clearly, she shouldn't be in that position. So they're going to use those mistakes, which probably could be legitimate mistakes on the part of the target, to ruin their professional reputation, or they'll be spreading rumors, etc., like we talked about with the deceiver. So they're going to damage the professional reputation with anybody they can find. Peers, they're talking a lot to a lot of other people. And when you have a leader who might be talking to peers and all kinds of other people about somebody else's performance, this is a red flag, right? Leaders should not be talking to other people unless they're talking to their leader about advice on how to help somebody's performance. They shouldn't be talking to peers. They might go to HR, but again, they're going to ruin their reputation with anybody who will listen. They're going to point out every single error that this target makes and just decimate their professional reputation. And why do they do this? They want the target out of the way. They want the target out of the position, so maybe they can slide into it. And you think that sounds really weird, but when I left, my bully got my job. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that I was targeted. They're wanting them just out of the workplace completely, so that either they can have their job, or I think some of them just enjoy the chaos that they can create, and they can control and remove these really solid professionals out of a position that they love. So that's the goal. So again, we've talked about some of these impacts already: damaged reputation, loss of confidence. We could also see these health issues coming up, chronic health issues, damage to relationships internally and externally. So they might, because again, their performance erodes, and it can become very visible that their performance is eroding. It may actually damage, or people may distance themselves who were traditionally good coworkers and colleagues of theirs. But it also can damage personal relationships. This becomes all consuming for targets. They don't understand why it's happening. They don't understand how to stop it. And so when they are out to dinner with friends, this is all they can talk about. When they are with their spouse, that's all they can talk about. And so it starts to put strain on those personal relationships as well. We've already talked about losing a job. For about 25% of targets, they may jump out of a job and they may either jump out of a job and into no job, or they jump into a job that pays less. So we see some financial instability oftentimes with these targets. And we see long-term trauma. We see people going on to a new job, but they carry a lot of distrust with them, and they don't know who to trust because they don't know understand how this happened, and they don't know why it happened, and they don't know if it could happen again, and it honestly can happen again. So we see long-term trauma. I've actually met quite a few people who have left careers that they've spent years studying for and years doing, and they've never gone back to being a nurse. They've never gone back to being an accountant, whatever it is. And so they are losing also those career opportunities. Just quickly here, I know we want to get to some questions as well. So how can we intervene? By being an active bystander. And these are, if you've been trained to intervene in a harassment or discrimination kind of situation, very, very similar. An active bystander in the moment recognizes, hey, something is going on here that's wrong, and I have some courage and ability to intervene, so I'm going to do that. And in that moment, they are able to stop the conversation, prevent some additional abuse from happening, and demonstrate that they are supportive of the target in the same time. Most targets feel very isolated, and they don't think, because again, nobody is preventing this person from treating them this way. They oftentimes feel like they are the bad person and that they deserve it, and nobody comes to their aid. So how could we intervene? Very similar, like I said, to how we might intervene and when we see discrimination or harassment going on. I have modified these from the Kerwin Institute, just a couple of ideas. If and I should say too that if you are able to intervene, it might depend on your um, relationship to the bully. So if the bully is your boss, you may not feel comfortable intervening in the moment, but you can still go to the target afterwards and say, hey, I'm here. I saw that. I thought it was inappropriate, and show your support. So you can use humor. If humor is your something that you use often to your advantage, if you carefully use humor, you could disrupt a conversation. Let's say, for example, somebody is being very passionate about these spreadsheets and berating somebody's structure of their spreadsheets. You could say, wow, I had no idea you were so passionate about the structure of spreadsheets, right? When you try to make a joke of it or try to make light of it or say something that somebody doesn't expect in the moment, it can really change and shift the response for the bully and stop the bully, at least for the moment, from doing whatever they're doing. I can guarantee you that even if you don't know the target, but you see somebody screaming at them or berating them in a public space, or has them in an office with an open door and is saying things that are not constructive and kind to them, you can grab them and say, hey, I was just looking for you. You're late for the meeting, or hey, I need to talk to you about something right now. I can guarantee you the target will be confused, but they will go with you because, again, it stops that interaction in the moment. You can advocate for a target. As I mentioned, a lot of these behaviors are very subtle, but when we see a pattern and we suspect somebody is being targeted in some way that is a little more subtle, we can advocate for them. In the case of somebody being left out of meetings or left out of getting information, we could advocate for them and say, no, it's not okay to leave them out. I'm going to invite him right now. Again, based on the relationship that we might have with the bully, we could also use direct communication. If we might not use this with a peer, but if certainly we were the leader of somebody who was behaving inappropriately, that was behaving very abusive to another person, we could say, this is not okay. This behavior needs to stop. This is unprofessional and disrespectful, and be really clear about that. So not all the ways that you can intervene, but a couple of things in the moment. If you feel like I feel strong enough where I could go and intervene and stop this interaction from happening in the moment. It's very helpful and very relieving to the target. But again, don't put yourself into any position where you might be physically or psychologically in danger of intervening, because you can always go to the target afterwards and show your support there. And if you see something escalating or you feel like things are getting aggressive, really loud and aggressive, if you have access to security or somebody in your organization that is responsible for the safety of employees, I would say, feel free to go and get them, because these can get pretty aggressive situations. So how do we prevent? And I have some kind of bad news for you. Once a bully has taken hold in an organization, it's not impossible, but it's really, 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 really hard to excise them, especially because this is typically what can happen. A bully is targeting somebody. We might see that there's a problem potentially with this person, but we don't really name it bullying. And we maybe say, but they have 10 people and maybe we should just promote them. And when we promote them, they'll only have 2 direct reports, then they'll impact less people. And so what oftentimes happens is these very aggressive, abusive people can get into pretty high places in organizations. Well, what do those promotions do? They reinforce their behavior. The way I'm behaving is perfectly fine. They promoted me, and they double down. So even though now they only have 2 people that they're responsible for, the span of control has expanded as well. And it's even going to be more difficult to get them out of your organization, without, you know, documenting and firing and going through all that whole process, right? One of the best things you can do is create a clear anti-bullying policy. And oftentimes we just have a line in our policies about, respectful behavior, but what does that mean? Include in that anti-bullying policy some examples like I had of the behaviors on the previous slides. About 66% of cases, and I said it's pretty rare that a case will actually go into court, but about 66% of the cases that do make it into some kind of legal proceeding, 66% of them did not have any kind of anti-bullying policy. So again, the bully saying, I didn't know I couldn't behave this way. So the organization is then trying to defend themselves. We can give employees, leaders, HR professionals a common language. So educating all employees on what to look for. And so that we can, just like we did with harassment and discrimination, did training everybody make harassment and discrimination go away? Not necessarily, but it gave us a common language on which to identify it and have a conversation about it and report it. Take reports seriously. Don't just blow these off as, a interpersonal conflict, especially if we're seeing a pattern. There's a lot of churn in a particular department, etc. We can teach people bystander techniques that we just talked about. One of the things that I think is probably the hardest, but one of the best preventative things besides having the policy, is to help leaders set expectations for performance and behavior. One of my colleagues at Elite, the very first year I worked with her, she said this sentence and it's always stuck with me. I think it's so powerful. She said, attitude and behavior are a part of performance. Attitude and behavior are a part of performance. We oftentimes talk about what we need to get done and we reward the what. We don't reward the how. And we need to bring them together and say, what you did was important, but how you did it was also important, and reward accordingly. Holding all staff accountable for their behavior regardless of a role, which gets to be difficult when we have founders and CEOs who maybe are at the tops of these organizations, maybe really challenging to hold them accountable, but it's certainly at the levels that we can hold all staff accountable for their behavior, the way they treat and talk to people. And then watch for patterns within teams and within leaders. One of the things that's really difficult about bullying, and even if there's a law, I think this is going to be really challenging for organizations, is because we have to wait for the pattern. Somebody yelling at somebody once is somebody having a bad day. Somebody doing it every day for a week starts to become a pattern. And so unfortunately, our targets have to experience some form of some level of abuse before we are able to even identify this as what's going on. So I would encourage you, look for patterns other ways if you can. Look at exit interviews. Look at engagement surveys? Are there comments? Are there things that are tying back to a team or back to a leader that might indicate to you there's something going on? Maybe it's not bullying, maybe it's just ineffective leadership, or maybe it's just kind of this negative culture within the team, but it's certainly telling you that there might be something going on that you could take a look at and see if it is bullying, if it is something else. Whew, with that, that was a lot of talking. I don't know if there were I don't see any questions coming in the chat, but I'm going to turn it over for questions in just a minute, but I would not be a very responsible program director if I didn't tell you the program that I'm just so proud of. And the MBA in Leadership and Change has just been such a fabulous program for so many people in our community. And we're starting, of course, to have students from all over the country graduate from this program: Arizona, Texas, Pennsylvania. And so we are super excited that as a college, we are able to offer this amazing program all over the country. But if you're interested in learning more about this, you can always connect with me. But we have an info session tomorrow at noon. And I am going to pop I think I still have the link. I'm going to pop the link in the chat. This is a session or a program that is all online. We meet weekly on either Tuesday night or Thursday night. You meet as a cohort in Zoom sessions. We have accelerated 8-week courses. So every 8 weeks, we have a new topic and a new instructor. And if you're like, I'm not really sure, I'm interested in doing the full MBA, we have the first few classes you take actually count as a 12-credit leading change certificate. So you could start doing the certificate and then decide to go on and apply those to the MBA in Leadership and Change. But if you'd like to just learn more about that, I encourage you to either connect with me or come to the info session. Tomorrow we will have another info session in August as well if tomorrow doesn't work out. Whew. And again, that was a lot of talking. So I'm going to pause there and just see what kind of questions people have. Check our time here too. Aubrey, you see any questions?
I don't see any in the chat so far. I actually have a question. Would you be, and you certainly don't have to use names, Don, but would you be comfortable sharing like maybe a success story of when someone stood up to bullying in the workplace, or when you've maybe observed kind of a positive action where someone's making that positive change? Because I don't know if I've really been lucky enough to see that yet. So I'm kind of curious if you've seen that in real life and how that went.
Yeah, trying to think, I don't know if I've personally witnessed it either. But we do know that early on, if somebody is demonstrating these behaviors early on, if the target is able to say, this isn't okay, like you are not going to talk to me like that. If you very firmly set your boundaries with that bully, they're less likely, unless they're after your job, then they might keep targeting you. But if they're just looking for a target, which some are, just looking for somebody who they can go after, there is some indication that very early on you can thwart that behavior. The longer it goes on, and unfortunately a lot of times, because these are very experienced professionals and they think, well, I can handle this difficult person, or I can handle this, I'm very experienced, I can deal with this, and they don't nip it in the bud, and it goes on for a variety of months. The longer it goes on, the less likely that confronting the bully will make it work. So yeah, I think it's kind of tricky, and I honestly, I don't know if I've actually witnessed it, but that might be a good thing. Like I have a network of other people that might have examples that I should collect. That'd be a good exercise.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any more questions for Don before we wrap up here?
Hi, Don. This is...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Christina.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We both had a question at the same time. Hi, Don. Christina Knitch. I think you knew me as Christina Rossiter. We took some classes together a million years ago.
Yes, yes.
Great presentation. This has been extremely beneficial for me in a lot of different ways. I was wondering if you have a recommendation for how to bring up to maybe someone's leader that you think you might be observing bullying.
Mhm.
That's the part, you did a great job of defining the difference between conflict and bullying. And I'd like to think that that would work super well when having a conversation with someone, but like, are there any strategies or like specific words to stay away from or to use that you would recommend when trying to kind of broach the subject with a leader?
Yeah, I think people's reaction to and I actually don't like the word bullying either, but this is what the concept is called. There's been some advocates who have said we should call this non-status harassment or psychological violence. So we could change the name, because I think when people hear bullying, they're like, oh, they're like, oh, this is just immature. It does feel immature. It does. But that is the concept, and that's what it's called. So I don't know if you have to call it bullying, but I think even if you're an observer, and I would say, especially if you're a target, and I didn't mention this, but you should be documenting, because like I said, most people are like, oh, I can deal with this difficult person. But again, if you start to like, I don't know, that behavior wasn't, what didn't feel right, we can see a pattern much more quickly on paper. So we're more likely to kind of have that evidence of like, there's something not right here. And if you're witnessing it, I think if you can also document and say, I heard this person say this, and then this happened, and they said this in front of people, documenting what was said or done, or any, kind of exclusions or anything like that that were going on. Were there any witnesses? And then I think for most, because again, this isn't illegal. So when we hear harassment or discrimination, when we hear elements of that, the organization has to act. Bullying, they don't have to act. And again, it's easy to just consider it conflict. I think if you can come to them and say, I saw, these 8 incidents in the last 2 weeks, and here maybe there were witnesses, maybe they weren't, but also what is the business impact? So it stopped work. Somebody left because they're seeing this behavior. Anything that you can tie to a business impact, I think, is very powerful. So you can be advocating for the person at the same time you're demonstrating to the business leader that you're talking to that I'm concerned because yes, this is not good behavior, but it's also, it also impacts the business. And I know that sounds strange because we should care about the people, but oftentimes it's not looked at unless there's a really clear link between that and work being disrupted. I don't know if
That's
that helps,
great.
Christina.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Dawn. That was really helpful.
Yeah, good to see you.
You too.
Yeah.
Hi, Don. Just one quick question for you. So as you know, I have kiddos. One is entering middle school. The other is going to be in 5th grade at an elementary school. I feel like the local schools have done an excellent job just kind of talking about what bullying is, right? How to not be a bully, how to be friendly, how to, has that, I'm wondering if there's a direct correlation, if you know any of this or have looked at this, between kind of having those kind of programs at that level, because I feel like those behaviors and attitudes kind of feel like they start earlier, maybe, and this could hinder some of the behavior as an adult. I'm wondering if you've kind of seen that connection and if you think it's working.
Yeah, I guess I haven't seen any research that tells me that those programs directly are influencing. We do know that a number of childhood bullies outgrow it, and don't ever target anybody in the workplace. And I have yet to find research that shows like this percentage of people are childhood bullies and then continue on to bully in the workplace. Certainly, this is a function of power and feeling powerless in some way, or trying to gain power, both on the playground and in the workplace. So I'd have to think that there probably is a connection. If you don't feel power as a child, and you don't gain some semblance of power, maybe that's why some people outgrow it, that you're going to go into bullying in the workplace. So I haven't seen any direct correlations. Sorry, Melissa, I maybe should dig a little deeper into that. But we also know that with the targets, a lot of people assume that there was this personality piece that was making them an easier target. We do know that only about a third of the people who were targeted by childhood bullies also are targeted in the workplace. So about 2/3 of people who are targeted never had any experience with any kind of that abuse at the childhood level. So so we do know some of the pieces there. We know that childhood bullying actually has or I'm sorry, the workplace bullying has increased over the years, and we've seen some correlation between that and the things that have been going on the world stage in terms of our leaders. And so it'd be interesting to see if are those programs holding that steady, or are our children seeing some of that too? And is it increasing? I guess I don't have a clear answer for that.
Yep. I'm interested in it from the social media aspect of things too. So, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. About 40% of people are targeted are remote workers too. So you think that sending people home and doing a lot of things virtually, you mentioned social media, right? You think people would be braver when they weren't in the same room with each other. And that seems to be the case. We still see a lot of targeting happening in the virtual environment as well. Any other questions?
All right, well, if you think of any last minute questions, feel free to copy down Dawn's email there, or if there's something you'd rather ask her privately, you're welcome to reach out. And just remember the info session she mentioned, you're welcome to attend that. And Dawn, thank you so much for your time today and all this information. It was extremely helpful, and really appreciate you lending your time and talents to our educational series today.
Great, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending. This ends our session, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.